Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Thriving Adoptees podcast. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Elle Klassen. Looking forward to our conversation today, Elle.
Yeah, me too. Thank you for having me, Simon.
Delighted. Now, keen listeners that are up on the detail may have noticed that I sometimes ask these days, does the word healing resonate with you? And the reason that I do that is because of you, Elle. You know that, right? It's because healing does not resonate with Elle, and you've got some pretty good reasons for that, right?
Right. I think I do.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. So please share, because it might resonate with one of the or two of the listeners, even, or
Right.
even more.
Well, and I have had one or two. I have had conversations with others in our community where it doesn't quite resonate either.
Yeah,
Um, but we all want to feel better in our situations. You know, a lot of people don't resonate with the terms coming out of the fog either, or um, I can't think of any others right now, but there are some other things, or even how we refer to biological family, whether we say biological mom or first mom, or right, like, but I think it's because until very recently, we haven't, as adoptees, had much of a voice. And so you use the terminology that is maybe appropriate for now, or it's the best we've got at the moment, right? But as we listen to each other's stories, sometimes we're thinking, oh, okay, that makes sense, but I'm not quite in that space. So for me, that word healing is too mixed up with growing up born again and growing up in that really high control evangelical religion, and which for me, feels really culty now because it's very high control and it's very insular. And uh, I grew up as a pastor's kid as well, so I was literally in the church all the time.
yeah.
And so, yeah, that word healing it feels like there is an absolute end goal that you can get to where everything will be all better and there will be no problems from then on in. And if you don't get there, that's your fault. That's somehow on you. And if I just take that sort of religious sort of road, it's on you because you haven't trusted God enough. You have maybe sin in your life that's not dealt with. You are not moldable enough. You're not, what's the term? I've been out of it so long now that I'm starting to lose some of the terminology, which I'm kind of glad about.
Yeah,
And yeah,
that's a good thing. I
yeah,
think, yeah.
but it also makes it sometimes hard to recall. What was that again? Um, Teachable is one of them, soft and malleable to the Lord's leading. And so if you don't,
Are you open to the voice of God?
right, yes. Oh, did you just ask me that?
I'm just thinking about we sometimes get Jehovah's Witnesses, once every 18 months,
Oh,
you get them
yeah.
knocking on the door.
Hmm.
They have the kind of slightly taunty words sometimes,
Yeah.
because they're trying to disrupt, aren't they? Um,
Mm.
and I'm also thinking about people, Romanies, coming to our office once about 20 years ago and wanting to go and come into our offices and disrupt the staff and sell them Lucky Heather, right?
Oh,
And I said, I'm sorry, they're all busy.
yeah.
They haven't got time for your stuff. And she she threw some put down at me, like, well, um, you know, God be with you or something, like, or, but there was a barb to it. There was a barb to it. It was like, oh, well, yeah, you're not it's not the heather you're missing out on. It's salvation.
Yeah.
But you're an ignorant, work obsessed idiot. But I'm just going to try and put you in my place, in your place. But
Yeah.
really, it's my defense mechanism, for being rejected from a workplace, Right. But
Yeah.
that's what they do. People try and put it on us. We're not open. Oh, we're not open to that. We're not open. We're not open to.
That's right.
Yeah.
You're closed off and growing up born again, rebellious then, you know, um, your heart is hard, right? and
Yeah. That's the opposite of the
all of it.
malleable. That's the opposite of
Yeah.
malleable, right?
Yeah, exactly. So you've hardened your heart off to the true leading of the spirit, all this sort of stuff. But the point is that there is an answer. There is a definite answer. Um, my the mother I grew up with, she was very well, part of evangelicalism too. It's in the name, right? You're supposed to proselytize. That's the point. And many are well meaning. I have to say this, many are well meaning because they so think that there is a black and white, that this is the truth and everything else isn't it. And they are literally concerned that people are going to an actual literal hell forever, right? So the well-meaningness is that they don't want you there to end up there, right? Um, and so the proselytization. But she would often use
Do you
the
mean by selling? Do you mean selling the message by proselytizing?
proselyte well, by witnessing, right? And trying to bring people into, you know, have a conversion moment
Oh,
where then you give your heart, your life over to God.
yeah.
And
Enroll. You're trying to
that's
enroll.
right. That's right. You ask Jesus into your heart, and now you're saved and you're in.
Yeah.
A friend the other day called it fire insurance, which I grew up calling it too, which cracked me up. I was like, oh yeah, yeah, I know that term. Yeah, fire insurance.
Fire insurance.
Also, there's a sort of a what would I say? There's sort of, as children, maybe because you don't quite understand, there would be eventually a cutoff date where you become responsible for being able to know and understand, right? And I heard somebody a while call that when you become eligible,
Oh,
which kind of cracked me up. So there's this cutoff point where all of a sudden you're old enough to understand, and now if you don't ask Jesus into your heart, you're going to be in hell
yeah.
later. Yeah.
The metaphor that was coming to my mind ties in with what you just said, actually. It's like a monopoly metaphor, and it's called the get out of hell card.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. You got your card. You're in. Uh-huh. Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. But she would always ask people, do you have assurance of salvation? So this one and done deal where you can know at the end of your life you will go to heaven, because that's as literal a place as hell, right? So assurance. So everything is about knowing everything for sure. And yet, Simon, I can tell you right now, I have never met so many insecure people in my life.
Yeah.
Because well, partly because if some is good, more must be better. Like whose rules then, right? So Christianity is pretty broad. You've got Catholicism, and within Catholicism, that's you got Jesuits and Franciscans and Carmelites, and and they all sort of have a different, seemingly. I don't really know Catholicism, but they all seemingly have a different bit of a point of view. And in Protestantism, you have that evangelical thing, you have very charismatic, you have possibly, I don't know, what would Eastern Orthodox, is that more Catholic or what? I don't know, but who's got it? Who's right?
Yeah.
So in order to be certain, you have to keep making up more rules.
Yeah. And it's like, you talked about fire insurance.
Yeah.
Somebody selling fire insurance has to um, has to dramatize it, has to bring in some sort of jeopardy, has
Mm-hmm.
to has to put you in a place of fear of something that you
Mm-hmm.
need the fire insurance to protect you from. So
Right.
it's part of the game of convincing, selling, I can't even say the word proselytizing, but it's like
Proselytize.
proselytizing. I'll let you say that bit. So it's part of their thing, right? They have to introduce some insecurity. So probably one of the reasons that they may be insecure on the inside is because they spend so much time trying to make other people feel insecure on the outside, so that they will join the
Club.
get out of
Yeah.
get out of hell club.
Right. Well, the thing is, we humans are meaning making machines, right? We tell stories, and Christianity is only one religion among thousands, really, and only one among thousands that have ever existed of traditions and mythologies and creation stories. And because people want to know why, right? We want to know why things are. We want to know, well, when you think of old Greek mythology too, like why is that big yellow thing up in the sky so scorching hot? Well, it must be somebody riding across the sky every day in a chariot, right? Like we come up with things to explain the unexplainable, and to so that we can know. And religion is one of those forms of knowing, and somehow trying to create a comfort in being able to know. And yet, so often, we end up, from my perspective, I just have to say this to everybody. I get it. It's my perspective. So, you know, don't come for me. But I, I think so often when we want to just know, we end up sometimes being more insecure because there are questions behind that now too. And I just don't feel that we can ever really be settled in, now I have it, now I know all the truth, now I got it, I've arrived, and I'm better. And that issue I have then with us as adoptees, and all is like, how can I find healing in whatever the situation is that I found myself in? The insecurities, we all have such different stories. You didn't grow up religious, from what I understand, and I really did. A lot of adoptees grow up in really religious homes because, especially Christian, I think, because they love adoption. They even use some scripture verses completely out of context in order to support uh, the idea of earthly adoption as opposed to heavenly adoption. And there are as many stories that we have because there's, that many of us, and yet there are often these really ubiquitous experiences, like sort of this underlying depression that we can't figure out why. I have a nice life. Somebody might have a wonderful partner and kids, or they've had a great career or whatever, and yet there's always this depression or anxiety, all these unexplainable things that we find out later often, our trauma responses to having been separated. We are mammals after all, right? We don't even separate puppies and kittens too early from their mothers. And yet somehow with humans, it's fine. It's okay. And I'm not saying again that sometimes external care isn't needed, but this idea that there will be nothing wrong after that is absurd. Um, and so we often have similar experiences, and then to try to figure out why it happened and to have a reason for why it happened so that I can get to ultimate healing. I just i don't think that life is something that just gets on a trajectory and goes up until I find that healing spot where I have all my answers and now I'm better. I think it cycles around, and some days are better than others. um you Kid of pop culture, I just think of in excess. Some days you kick, some days you get kicked, whatever. Some years you kick, some years you get kicked. But I think for me, the idea of peace instead of healing has been much more helpful. And peace in sometimes not knowing that sometimes shit happens. And one of the things that is was us being separated from biological family, having things changed, having secrets, having gatekeepers. Why? I mean, there are lots of reasons. I don't think there's some ultimate power out there who did it on purpose to teach us a lesson. Like, what are you teaching a baby? Like, that's bullshit, like. But this is where we are. So now what?
Yeah. I was thinking about, as you said, meaning making machines. Um, and we're also meaning seeking machines, aren't we?
Yes. Yeah.
Like a heat seeking missile, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
We're
Absolutely.
seeking to know why.
Yeah.
And as you were talking, the knowing the answer to the question will give us peace.
Mm-hmm.
It is the kind of myth,
Mm-hmm.
I think. And the bit that comes to the bit that comes to me, I'm just trying to think about whether I can make it into a precinct. Yeah, if we're always if we're at peace with not being at peace,
Mm-hmm.
we're always at peace.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. Um, I love lis- um, listening to or reading different philosophers, and I don't have a great rote memory, but I remember concepts and ideas, right? So I can't ever necessarily say, well, this mode of thinking was Immanuel Kant or whatever. But these different things. But there's this. He's a philosopher, modern philosopher. His name is Peter Rollins. He's Irish, and he he does come from a Christian sort of perspective, but his is very different. And he talks about often peace in that unknowing. That when you are able to uh, be okay in the lack, in the sort of area that I can't possibly know everything, that's when you can relax, because it's impossible to know everything, to get every answer, to have everything explained to you. And when you can be at peace in that, that also opens you up to learning, because you're coming at things with curiosity and you're coming at things with an open mind rather than coming at everything with one perspective and uh, with one way of thinking that already is going to direct what you're open to. sort of that confirmation bias instead of the learning of, oh, well, that's an excellent point, actually, that keeps you expansive. And he often, in the things I've listened to, will uh, comment about Albert Camus and Albert Camus, the idea of the rebel, which I had it written down here. Where is it? The rebel lives in tension between the life that is lived and the life that is unlived yet. And to live in that tension rather than feeling that you need to have all the answers in order to finally be healed.
Yeah. I'm as you were talking, I love the in excess reference.
Mm.
You know what yeah, what a great loss that was, that guy. You seen the
Mm.
documentary about him?
Michael Hutchins, yeah. Hmm.
What a loss, what a loss.
Yeah.
Um, I was thinking about of somebody around that time. It was that there was the Madonna film Desperately Seeking Susan,
Yes.
you know, and I was
That's
thinking
right.
about
Yeah.
desperately seeking answers.
Yes.
You know, like I can't rest until
Yeah.
I have this answer, until I
Right.
know why,
Yeah.
and you know, and obviously for us adoptees, why I was relinquished. You know,
Hmm.
um, I I one of the biggest moments of my peace, healing, whatever you want to,
Hmm.
was feeling viscerally feeling the um, the pressure my birth mother was under. I could reading this letter from her to the adoption social worker, I could feel the power imbalance.
Yes.
I could feel the desperation.
Hmm.
I could feel the desperation, and how much free will
Hmm.
was involved there.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know how much free will was involved there,
Yeah.
but I can tell that there was a lot of desperation going on, and my guess would be there wasn't. Influence a lot of influence was being brought to bear,
Yeah. A lot of coercion.
a lot of coercion,
Yeah.
and there's you know when you talk about the evangelical piece, I think you know religion has had a lot of involvement in the church has had a lot of involvement in adoption,
Yes.
and you talked about Peter Rawlings being an Irishman. One of the things I think about that is uh, you can't buy a kid in the UK, right?
Right. Excellent.
But you can buy a kid in America. So was that how much of that coercion and how much of that migration of adoptees from Ireland to the US? You know, this, yeah,
Yeah.
you just
With the Magdalene laundries and things like,
all
yeah.
that, yeah. And my I found out that uh, my birth father and or his siblings were involved in one of those in Liverpool, right? Which is that's England.
Yeah.
It's not very far from Liverpool and Dublin. You know, like trading ports, hubs. You know, very close to one another. Ferries going across all the time. But yeah, I didn't know. I'd heard about those laundries in Ireland, but I'd never heard about them in the UK. But they were
Right.
in the 60s.
Sure. Well, because for the church, whether it is, I mean, I don't know if this was in the UK and Ireland, uh, but the Salvation Army, which is Protestant, also had mother baby homes, so it wasn't just Catholic like Magdalene laundries and things. But what is behind a lot of that is this idea that that is the mother's redemption to, she got herself pregnant. So first, that's amazing, right?
Yeah.
Like how many immaculate conceptions there have been. Um, but she was fallen. She got herself pregnant. So she's slutty, right? So this relinquishing of her child redeems her by giving the child a proper, better life, um, which makes her feel really great, right? That she's not even okay enough to be a mother. She's not mother material. Um, but also it's our redemption because we're bastards, right? So if we go to a nice home, and back in the day, it was a two-parent heterosexual, a home, mom, dad, nice, middle class, hopefully upstanding citizens, conservative. And I don't mean politically conservative, but just, they all fit in nicely into their neighborhood. Um, and that is also our redemption. And that is the part of religion that I grew up with as well. So they will reference in the tradition I grew up in. I don't know any other Christian tradition what they say, but in the one I grew up in, they reference Paul's verses about how being adopted into God's family by asking Jesus to take control of your life is makes us joint heirs with Jesus so that we go to heaven and we're, joint heirs is like um earthly adoption. But now you have set up adopting parents as little godlets, really, which is idolatry, actually. But the thing was always that our earthly adoption was an example of what God does for us spiritually. So, as a little adoptee, in my head, I'm thinking, how much redeeming did I need? I was a baby, right? And when you think of why they say we need to be adopted into God's family, we need that redemption, is because God can't stand sin. He can't stand the imperfect. He can't be anywhere near it. He's white hot holy, basically, right? So you need to be made right through Jesus' sacrifice on the cross so that we can actually be in the presence of God. Well, as a human, like what is fallen? So I'm fallen. I'm imperfect. I need redeeming. I need to be made pure. So my adopting family, that's what they're doing for me because I'm that shitty. Now, I don't know if everybody else took it in like that, but I sure did,
Yeah.
you know? And that's not
And
even what the
they
verses
they
mean.
they
The
unbastarded
verses,
you. They unbastarded you.
right,
Yeah.
right. There's some like, hmm, adoptee transubstantiation happening where all of a sudden my DNA has turned into theirs miraculously. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like,
So let's go back. Let's get back to peace.
yeah.
Let's get back to peace, because we could go down that route, and you're far brighter than me on that stuff. So what's and I can't follow along. I can't even say I can't even say idolatry or proselytizing, whatever. What has brought you peace?
Well, it comes and goes. And I think that's the part where when I hear just like getting to healing, that is kind of, I don't love the word triggering, but I guess it sort of activates something in me because I don't feel like I'm at peace all the time. It comes and goes. It depends on
Yeah,
maybe a new piece of information I've learned or not, or uh, another interaction that I've had with somebody that was activating. What brings me peace, though, in those moments or coming out of them, is the fact that I don't need to know. And I'm going to get this not quite right. I know it, but I saw a little, I guess somebody had made a meme, out of it, and it was on social media. And it was about how a lot of sort of indigenous cultures that are uh, pagan. Pagan just means of the earth, like, so I don't mean pagan and from, how Christians would use that word, but just
Not a
of the
criticism.
earth.
You're not
That's right.
criticizing.
It's like Celtic spirituality too, like that like it's of the earth, right? The cycles of the earth and things like that. Anyway, um, that a lot of those sort of cultures have this idea that we're just a part of the world like everything else is a part of the world. The insects, the dogs, the birds, all the creatures and trees and things, we're just a part of that. And so when I think of myself as just a part of that, and I can enjoy the sunset and I can enjoy how hot it's going to get today outside, and and that's summer, and our summer is short, and then it will turn to autumn, and it's just part of these cycles that I can enjoy in moments. That is what's peaceful to me.
So there's a lack of resistance. There's an
Right.
opening. There's an
Yeah,
open.
I think so.
There's
To just be in the moment rather than hearkening back all the time or trying to figure out where I'm going all the time. If I can just be in a moment, whatever that moment is, that is a peaceful place.
yeah.
Because there's a lot of chaos going on all the time that I can't stop and that I can't have answers for.
And there's a oneness, right? So
Right. Yeah.
part of the
Yeah.
universe.
Right. Yeah.
Have you heard of a guy called Ramana Maharshi? Heard of him?
I
Ramana.
have. That name sounds familiar, but I
I
don't
think this
have
quote. I'm
specific.
going to attribute this quote to him. But it's from an Eastern bloke. Um,
Mhm.
he said, "My secret is I don't mind what happens."
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So there's
That's very much it. Yeah, absolutely. But I think it also, like Camus' Rebel, um, also puts you in a space where I mean, that's perfect, right? Like you don't have to know, but it puts you in the perfect space, which I think a lot of adoptees are in. We find ourselves in the perfect space to be at peace in those moments, but also able to still fight for change. Um, what did I have written down here? Uh, Fighting for change and enjoying the fight to make things better while we still live in the beauty and pleasure of the moment.
as opposed to being angry in the fight.
Right.
So
Now, there are always people who will say, "You sound angry." I'm like, "Do I? I'm not, I'm actually not. But I am pointing things out. And if that makes you think I'm angry, well, that sounds more like a you problem, to quote my daughter, right? That sounds like a you problem. Like if you're taking it that personally, I'm just pointing out the absurd and
yeah,
also what's wrong. Like it's wrong to pay money for babies. Like, come on, right? But it's also wrong to separate children from biological family to the point of changing birth certificates, which still happens in the UK, right? And in Canada, there might not be a lot of buying and selling going on in private um, companies, but that's still wrong. And it's absurd, like when you think about it. So you change my birth certificate as if I'm now from this family tree, But that family tree is not actually continuing. It's absurd. It's mine that's continuing. It's still my line. It's still the fallen line, so called, that's continuing. It's not this German one. It's this Russian Scottish one. Like, so if you think I'm angry, I okay. But that said, anger is a normal response to abnormal situations, and it's okay to be angry for a bit. Holding it inside creates disease.
Yes. When I get onto this subject, I I only have really one handhold on this that just seems really correct, right? It seems like it is spot on. And it's not it's somebody else's handhold, right? So a Brit adoptee, right? I could go into all her backstory. That doesn't matter, right?
Yeah.
A Brit adoptee who does advocacy work in the legislation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Within legislation space. What she said to me is, if I show any anger in front of politicians, I get moved out of the room or
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that is the only thing that I'm talking about. I'm thinking about, does my state of mind, does it help me, or my state of heart, right? Does my state of heart, does that support me in getting to where, getting the change that I want to change to happen, right?
Yeah.
And if and I will, if I was doing that, I have chosen not to go down the advocacy legislation space, right? It's not the space that I feel. Oh, I was gonna put some really religious language on there, right?
Oh, do it. Do it.
Oh, but I'm not religious at all. I was kind of brought up a little bit religious, but just yeah. But I don't feel called, huh? I don't think. Do I want to spend a lot of time with? Do I want to spend a lot of time with politicians? No. Do I want to spend a lot of time with lawyers? No.
No.
Do so I don't want to do that. Right. What interests me is being at peace, or healing, or feeling better. You said feeling better, right? So
Yeah.
I want to, we don't want to think better. We want to feel better. So I don't. But whenever the topic of anger and advocacy comes up, I make that connection, because that is a learned experience of another adoptee, and I think it's sage advice.
Absolutely.
Sage
Absolutely.
advice. And I
I
will
think
change, and I will change my demeanor to get what I want. Now,
for
people
sure.
people say, "Well, I'm a chameleon, and that's a bad thing." Well, sometimes being a chameleon is a good thing, because it helps you
Sure.
get what you want. Sometimes, if you feel that you're going against everything that feels sacred, everything you're going against everything that feels authentic to you, then that's right. Yes, of course. Like
Yeah.
chameleons. Chameleons change color to stay alive.
Yeah.
So like it's not. We live in a world of oversimplification, don't we? Like,
Oh, absolutely. And perhaps that's brilliantly put, because perhaps that is why the idea of just healing or just this, or, like slotting things in is is so activating for me, because that isn't easy. It's not easy to get to these points, but just to have that answer and it's done. But I think we your friend who is in that advocacy space, of course, they have to rein that sort of show of emotion. And also, it's a woman, right?
yeah,
So I mean, there's the added sort of bonus of being a woman in a space that is mostly male often. And the moment we as women have heightened emotion, you're being hysterical, right? That now gets into sort of the patriarchal view of things. And so she's very dismissible because she's just an angry, shrieky woman who should get some therapy, right? So there's the added bonus there
This is the
for
UK,
her,
right? So she should get some friends. We wouldn't say
right?
therapy.
That's right.
If you go to a therapist, you're a weirdo. Haven't you got
Okay.
any friends? Yeah.
Right.
This is the
Okay.
British way.
Okay, fair enough. The British way, yes. Just go
Didn't
to
do
the
me
pub
any harm.
instead with some friends.
I was beaten out within an inch of my life every day of my school of my 8 years at Eton. Didn't
That's
do
right.
me any harm. What are you
That's right.
saying?
I'm fine. I'm fine. Um, that's so funny. Oh God. Keep calm, carry on.
Okay.
Um, but I think we do need to use those chameleon aspects. You know, we learned them as children. Again, it's not exclusive to an adoptee's experience, and yet it is very ubiquitous that we talk about. And I think it is heightened because we truly are square pegs in round holes. And so if somebody in their biological family feels like they don't quite fit, well, imagine not being related at all, right? So it just heightens the experience. It's not exclusive, it's heightened. And I think we do learn how to do that sort of thing. And on the one side, people could say, like you were saying, you're a chameleon, and then they go down the negative side of, well, that's manipulative and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, actually, no, it's survival, right? But also, it enables us, and this is where we get to the rebel again, right? Like your friend's a rebel because the only thing that would make one get involved in advocacy is a certain level of dis-ease and and anger to a certain point that these things are wrong and this needs to change. That is a different thing, though, from being an angry person. There's sort of that idea, back to religion, of righteous anger, right? And I often have the mental image of Jesus in the temple flipping tables, losing his temper. Um, and everybody backs that one. Well, yeah, because people are being idiots, right? So he's mad, he's flipping tables. That sort of righteous anger drives that sort of advocacy work, but you don't storm the Bastille, right? Like in anger because you're going to get thrown out. So there is a tension there that you have to live in, which is Camus' Rebel, where you're living in
Or your
that
daughter,
tension.
or your
That's
daughter,
right.
or her mother.
That's right. Yeah. Which that sounds like a you problem. And so I
How
think
old is she?
when she's 24,
All right.
but
Okay.
she was saying that when she was 16. But
I don't know who she got that from.
yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know whether she's an anomaly. Um, but when we live in these spaces where we're able to sort of hold it back a little bit and find that peaceful space for ourselves where we can rest, even though there's a lot of chaos a lot of the time. But that is also maturity, right? Like your friend is bringing maturity into that space rather than just blowing in like an angry 15-year-old who's trying to make space for themselves. There's a time and place for that. Parliament, not so much, right? Like that would be the same here. If I were to fly down to Ottawa and walk into Parliament and let somebody have it, I would also be escorted out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's not go anywhere near American politics in terms of
No,
stuff like
no, we're just going to stay in the Commonwealth here.
that. Yeah. I've a bit of a sideways question, but how, like, because me and my wife haven't got any kids, right? So I'm thinking about meaning and like and focus and self-centered and otherness, focusing on others, and I'm wondering how caring, having your daughter, I wonder how that impacted your peace, meaning
Hmm.
stuff.
Hmm. Um, let's see. We'll back up a little bit. I um sorry, you're probably gonna have to like get rid of these pauses because now I'm thinking real hard. Um, I never felt like part of my family. I know that a lot of adoptees will have the real both and of I did feel loved, I did feel supported, and I still felt like I didn't quite fit and I wasn't sure of myself. So it's a real both and I think that is a complicated space in which to live. And I also think it's one that people often don't understand, that things are not so binary as either or, black or white all the time. It is a both and. You can love your family and still feel like you want to know where you came from, right? I never really felt like I fit at all. And because it was also so controlling, uh, and I was not always very malleable. You know, I would fight and then I would feel bad for fighting because my religious upbringing taught me that I was supposed to respect my elders or like honor your parents. And so I would try to rein it in, but it was so discordant that I would end up fighting again. So it was just this constant thing. Um, and so I was never one of those girls who thought, oh, when I get married and all the children I'll have, I wasn't that, but I had a vague sense that I would like to have a family because I didn't feel like I had a family. And at that point, I didn't know that I could do a search. I didn't know that that was allowed. I only found that out like maybe when I was 19 or 20. And back then you had to pay, right? So anyway, got married young because that's also a religious thing. You know, you don't just move in with your boyfriend or anything. We got married, we were young. We had our first child when I was 26. It was a boy. And then when I was 30, we had our twins, a boy and a girl. And when I held that first, our first son, and he was a dead ringer for my baby pictures, that was pretty mind blowing because I had never, of course, like all of us, or most of us, I should say, I had never seen anyone who looked like me. And I didn't know that that would be a thing. Like I didn't know that that would affect me like that, to look at my baby picture and his and think, oh my God, that's amazing. But it was. And then when we had our twins and um, our son was first and it's a boy, and then she was born and the doctor said it's a redhead. Like that was pretty funny. It was like, and you know um having those little people. I have been an imperfect mother, I know this, and I also know now, looking back, some of the things that I did, some of the ways that I reacted, um, some of the ways in which I interacted, I can see now that it was related to being an adopted person, a relinquished and adopted person. And some of those things make me feel, oh, it's a little bit of a knife in your heart. Like I wish I would have mm, been out of the fog, let's say, then. Um, but I wasn't. And everyone, let's give the benefit of the doubt. Most people try their best, and I tried my best. Um, but what I did know was that I wanted them each to be their own selves, which I have never felt like I've ever been able to be. I don't even know now, and I'm kind of at peace with this now, back to the peace thing. As I try to just be me, whatever that is, I wanted them to actually really be. And if that meant they were pursuing sports or art or music or physics, although that one would be a long shot, um, but that they could do that, because that is not how I was raised. But I wanted their actual, you know, nature selves, not nurture selves. I wanted to nurture their nature.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Absolutely.
that wasn't done for me, but that was very high on my list, to nurture their nature.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question at all?
It does. It does. Yeah. It's a beautiful. Yeah. It's a beautiful thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And our oldest is 27. The twins are 24. And they're pretty cool people. They're
Yeah.
cheeky.
It's got a cool mum. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I'll go with that. I'll take it.
yeah. Yeah. We all find it tough, that compliment stuff.
Yeah. 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 It is hard. And that is a funny other common experience for us. Again, not exclusive to adoptees, but heightened by adoption, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you'd like to share that I've not asked you about, Elle?
Oh, goodness. I think maybe if we could just all cut each other slack. Sometimes in the adoptee space, I see people say, well, this person still seems so angry, even amongst ourselves, right? This person still seems really angry, or I don't like the term fog, or, uh, you know, we do this to each other, and even though we all know how complicated this journey is. And people are on their own trajectory. It takes as long as it takes. So if somebody seems to sort of be an angry person and it seems like they've been there for a bit, well, who am I to know what's happening in their head or their heart and how long they need to sit in that space? Or if somebody uses a different term other than fog, okay, it's all right. Like, how about we just sit back, take a breath, and cut each other slack? Because I think so often we haven't cut our own self slack because we felt like we need to try to fit, or and then we feel shitty for not fitting, or you know we feel guilty for searching because now we've made our adopting mom feel bad, or so all these different things. We need to cut each other and ourselves some slack and not get picky about the words we use, but also be aware of the words that we use. Like if we know that who we're speaking to has a hard time with, fill in the blank because we have a relationship with them. Well, okay, I can see that, and I will try to be careful for you because I care. But also let's be aware that we're all doing our best. We're trying.
Yeah,
That's all we can do, right?
indeed.
Yeah.
Thanks, Al.
Oh, thank you, Simon.
Thank you, listeners. We'll speak to you again very soon. Take care. Bye-bye.